I have a question to Mr. Degé, and it's you said you select the bushes or whatever you cut. How do you harvest the tree, the bush and small trees? Do you do it by handwork or is it done by machines? And additional question, do you do any aftercare of the land where you cut the bush and trees? Thank you.
Most of our charcoal, I'm referring now specifically to charcoal, is done by axe. It's workers and that's job creation. It's a lot of job creation. But there's also semi-mechanization where they use chainsaws. Very limited, but there is. Then there's also more mechanized versions where they use a bush roller to roll the bush. And also looking at the environment, there are also other methods which we do not endorse at all, where people use chains because they disrupt the soil. Any method that disrupts the topsoil is bad. It's really, really bad. We do not, we condone it completely. So coming to the harvesting, that is the harvesting method. Also from outside at KL, we're teaching, we've got a training program where we teach them how to chop the tree. Because we've seen in the past, you have all these stumps, and suddenly you have a veld fire and the cars need to travel. You damage the cars, people's life are at stake. So we teach them right to the ground to cut it off neatly. And then also as part of the aftercare, so the way you chop the tree, if you actually disturb the top part, that stems the regrowth. There's also a project that was done by Dr. Goethe-Institut at UNAM, and I've seen the results after 10 years, there was hardly any regrowth. So if you use a chainsaw which is flat, then you need to use other methods of aftercare. We've developed a new method now where we harvest the smoke. And part when you distillate the smoke, the wood acid, the pyrolytic acid, you get a byproduct out of it, the residue. That is your best organic thing to stem the growth. But I must also mention there are two models. The one model, we call it bush farming, farming with bush, where people do not do any aftercare. They opt for the model over a period of 20 years that every year they harvest an area of a farm. Next year, the second year, they come to the next, but it's a model over 20 years. So come year 20 again, they start at the first harvesting site again. I particularly do not like it, but it's not a personal taste. I cannot force people because of my personal taste. But this is really, and then I use the term sustainable harvesting, because most people in Namibia use the term responsible harvesting. Because that means, sustainable means I will do it over and over and over. And when you do rangeland restoration, that's exactly what you do not want. Our biggest challenge in Namibia is rangeland restoration. There's not enough grass for our cattle, for our livestock. So, and then aftercare, part of the FSC program is an aftercare program as well. So between 3 and 5 years, you need to start to aftercare already, the different methods to do it. It's calling in. So you can use goats, certain livestock, and rabbits, or you can use the parasites, specific kind of parasites, not chemicals. Chemicals is forbidden. Also no aerial spraying anymore, which used to happen in the past. Does that answer the question?
And part of the stuff that we're doing at NAST is to do trade analysis, import-export. I have a specific question to all the panelists regarding any study that was done to basically quantify the raw material, right, that you're using in your respective, areas of the value chain. That's number one. The next one is when we did the study on the export of forestry products, we could see a lot of to some extent, illegal importation, as well as illegal exportation of some of these forestry products. We're seeing it on the basis of looking at the volumes that are being taken out. So my interest is in understanding whether, as a country, we are thoroughly capacitated to deal with either illegal import and export, either the ports of entry or ports of exportation, just for the sustainability of the respective activities that you're doing. Thank you.
My name is Alice. I have a question. I have two questions. One will be for all the panelists, and one will be for the founder of Miombo. You indicated that you sometimes get cleared or forest resources from a government. How do you ensure that this cleared has actually met the CITES requirements? And do you also trace the origin of the resource that you're actually working on to produce something? And the other question is, everyone else is dealing with sustainable harvesting and trying to add value to the resource. Do you take aspects such as social inclusion and exclusion, or who's harvesting the resource? If kids or marginalized communities are involved in harvesting the resource, are we following the right requirements and the protocols? And if a resource has been harvested by kids, do we still take it into account and say that, yes, it's still viable? We can also link that to the cocoa plantation where kids were exploited to be harvested, and which actually led to a ban in cocoa starting the production of the Cadbury chocolates. So this is some clarity that I just want to find, just for interest's sake. Thank you.
One of the solutions is definitely the FSC model that we follow, and it will also answer the question of the lady behind you. FSC stands on 3 pillars: the environment, economy, and social. And that is being audited annually. They come out and check. It's a very, very strict checklist where we check this. Specifically in the charcoal industry, I'm just going to talk about the charcoal industry now. In the charcoal industry, we have guidelines for our producers, where they know what they are allowed to harvest. Together with Forestry, we work very, very closely with them. We're bringing out a new forest management plan to make it open for inclusivity to everybody. Because now we know with FSC, they follow the rules and they do the right thing. They analyze the things, they know exactly what they can take off. But the non-FSC is a different story. And that's why we work really closely with the Forestry. We report these cases. We see, and even the neighbors, all of them, they're very much involved, and they will report immediately if something is done illegally. Coming to illegal imports, this is something we've taken up with Forestry as well. We actually want to put a ban, and we need to write a letter now. That was the last request from Forestry, that we do not allow charcoal products to be imported into this country. Unless it's already packaged and it's but no raw product to come in, specifically for charcoal, unpackaged pulp, because that's important to protect our industry. Then coming back to the illegal side of harvesting, this will always happen in this country. We do not have enough, let's call it inspectors, people who go out and check. We rely on the community to assist. We can no longer rely on government to do it on its own. So it's a task of every citizen to really check on this and help to stem out illegal harvesting. And the Forestry side, they're very strict. You are fined, they confiscate your equipment, and you are suspended for a while. So talking from the charcoal industry, very, very strict, very strong policies, not just for the environment, for all 3 pillars that we need to follow.
For us who are in the honey business, it's still a bit tough because honey business is crowded with a lot of imported honey. So when it comes to the pricing, people are always comparing our prices to the one that is coming from outside, and usually it's a bit cheaper than one that is coming from outside. But the effects of that honey are more because people will end up getting sick because they're eating things that are not certified. So if the government could come in place and be able to limit the amount of honey that is coming in, and also go to places like Katima, teach people how to do bee farming, because most people are ignorant to things because they do not have information. When someone doesn't have information, it means they will just ignore something. They just say, no, bees are just bees, but they don't know what the bees can do, what they produce, the benefits of bee farming. Because bee farming is a big business, but most people do not know about it because they do not have the knowledge. It's only knowledge that is lacking. Once people have the knowledge, people will understand that honey business is another business to go on when it comes to farming.
We work via, like I said, via women cooperatives. So we have what we call the final women cooperatives. So these women actually register. They have about 28 associations where they register. So there is a registry of who these people are that actually go and source these ingredients. So with this association, what happens is that before you become a member, you undergo a certain training. This then teaches you on how to harvest the raw material so that it is sustainable in the end. And also then us that are manufacturing the cosmetics only buy them from the people that are registered within this organization, so that we know that for sure that these raw materials are sourced the right way. Thank you.
Most of the timber is actually transited through Namibia. I think, Mr. Otto must correct me, I think over the past 2 years we were the only company actually importing timber into Namibia. When I say, I'm talking about the hardwoods in northern Namibia, I'm not talking about plantation timbers in South Africa. So the timber is transited, so there's very little happening, let's say in SADC with hardwoods. And then, so you can get the statistics from Forestry. On CITES, I'm glad you've mentioned that because Petrocarpus angolensis, actually that whole range of species was listed on CITES in the last meeting, and though it became, it was implemented, it's 3 months after the meeting. So in March, I believe, we had to start applying for CITES documents. So CITES is the convention, international convention for endangered flora and fauna. Once a certain species is overly harvested in the market, it becomes under threat. It's listed on CITES so that more control is put on the usage of it. And the listing is done with a quota, without a quota. So with a quota means every country is given a certain usage of that species. Fortunately for now, CITES, Petrocarpus angolensis, Kiat, which is our main species, is listed without a quota. Successfully, Angola does issue CITES export permits. There's a CITES office, the ministry, we get the CITES transit permits. There's enforcement in the district forestry office. If you don't have your permits, you don't get any, you can't move the timber. So there, and the information was, the awareness was created really right after the enforcement, forestry officers already knew about it. They actually also have identification, they got samples, double identification, because the reason why Petrocarpus angolensis was listed is because border officials struggled to identify the species. So the illegal elements in the trade, they would say this species is for example, rosewood, but it's actually kiat. So that's why they listed the whole range of precautionary lenses, because this issue is not just here in Southern Africa, it's actually all over Africa. Timber is, and remind you, Namibia is only 10% forested. So countries like DRC, Angola, they're extracting a lot of timber from it. So they realize that kiat is a similar color to these species that are being exported mainly to Asian countries. And now, one of our values in Miombo is that we believe in the chain of custody. Chain of custody is an end-to-end view of how the timber moves from the forest to the final form. So in Angola, the Forest Act is actually much more mature than our Forestry Act. For example, the trees were sold here, there was a tree price. So a tree would go for, say, $500. But, a tree has different diameters. So in Angola, they would say per cubic meter, which is a biomass. What is the biomass value? Even when they do inventories, they don't just count the trees. They actually look at the biomass and quantify the biomass and base their usage and allowable cuts on the biomass. So chain of custody, when licenses are issued in Angola, you need to first start with the traditional authority. You get permission, they give you a map, the district office, the administrative office, municipality helps with that, and then once you have ended the discussion with the local authorities, you then take those documents and then you go to Forestry, and then there's a whole slew of procedures you need to undergo, which is one of them is an environmental assessment, where they need to come and determine how much, because they need to give you a license. Before you get the license, you first need to have an expert come in, quantify that resource, and then eventually get your license. I don't know if that covers all areas of the question. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question to Mr. Andrew. You mentioned that you are planting moringa and jacaranda. Both species, moringa, which moringa species do you plant? Because there are two, and one is indigenous to Namibia, the other one that is being planted, and the medicinal value of the plant has been studied intensively, but that's an Indian, the Indian moringa. And I just wanted to ask you whether you are aware of the moringa that you are planting, and also the jacaranda is an invasive species in South Africa, for instance. Are you aware of that, and is it not better to plant local species? And then a question for Leroy. Leroy, yes. I am so impressed with it. I was very impressed. I was very impressed with everything. But now I love wood and I love kiat, and I was wondering, is there any organization that actually grows kiat from seed? What my problem with all this is that we are taking from the forest, and we're just taking and not replacing. And I also think that in this country for too long, all the farmers have just lived off the land and are not replacing anything into the land. And now here we're carrying on with taking trees, mature trees from the forests and not replacing. It is very, very difficult to find any indigenous trees for a garden, for instance, to plant. I know Nami Trees has indigenous trees, but they struggle to find indigenous plants, little indigenous saplings and so on. Is there any organization that actually does that? And I think that would be
It's a long-term business, but it will be very profitable.
So I think we can also look into that in time and also discuss with the guys that I'm dealing with and also give them that information. And yes, I also told them that Chakaranda is an invasive species, then at least that one can help. So at least thank you very much for the information. All right.
Dr. Dekawa, I don't know if I'm saying it correct. Dr. Dekawa. Yeah, she's done a PhD on Cryptocarpus angolensis, and during that study, she looked at regrowth and planting and what it takes to actually, from seedling to fully grown tree, what you need to do. And she found that the initial couple of years, I just forgot how many years, you need to manage, you need to have a nursery, under nursery, but the costs to regrow these trees is not worth it, because a fully mature Kia tree is 100 years old. Now, fortunately, actually, with Kiat, if you fell it the right way, it actually self-regenerates. And what ends up happening, we've seen, I went to some old sites in Angola. I've been working a lot in Angola. I'll talk about our Namibian stuff soon. The old harvesting areas, there are stumps that the regrowth, you can see like 3, 4 trees, seedlings, shoots come out. Now they start competing, and then you have to now prune them and select, say, the best 2. And now what happens is that's why you first need to put your head under management. And you need to get a tenure on that area, a multi-year tenure, say, for example, 20, 25 years, so that you can do post-harvesting, pre- and post-harvesting activities. And your post-harvesting activities, you need to come back to your areas. What you first do is you take your concession, you divide it up into quadrants, and then you do rotational harvesting. And then you come back to the old areas, and then you look at what's regrowing. You need to protect those small trees, those small little seedlings from fires, from grazing, because you need to come back at the end of your cycle. You need to come back and then re-harvest these trees again. Because what takes a lot of time is the root system to build, for the tree to have a proper root system. From once a root system is in, it's relatively fast. It's only 20 years or so. So it kind of like in Mozambique. I've met a very successful entrepreneur, Somela. They managed to actually come back to previously harvested trees because the Mozambican legislation allowed them to have the tenure on the areas, on the forests, for 25 years. In the Namibian legislation, the Reforest Act, there's no such thing. The previous act encouraged auctions. So the community would cut down 500 trees and they'd invite anybody. And usually foreigners would bid because they would source from many countries. So if they see Namibia is now selling, they quickly come in, offer a price that none of the local companies can pay for, and then they would take the trees or just process a little bit. So that was very difficult. Competing with international companies was extremely difficult for startup companies. That's why it took us 5 years to get to this stage. Because it was Chinese, Vietnamese, and they'd use fronts, other businesses, and they'd fund them to buy. So we had to, survive that wave. But the director of Forestry, really, they have taken it seriously to localize and regionalize the value chain, and not to just allow foreign international companies to benefit, especially because they have areas in other countries like Mozambique, and they are fully funded, multi-generational companies, and they can quickly come and buy logs from an auction, crippling the local industry. So it is important that, and I'm happy that Forestry have decided to create a database, look at all different carpenters. They've encouraged Ministry of Education to change the specification, encouraging the local distribution of the timber, over the past year, we've been supplying close to 10 different cotton trees, allowing them to have kiat, teak. So yeah, so I'll end there.
Okay.
I'm interested, you are talking about beehives. I believe you are referring to the Randstad and the Kenyan beehive. And if you are referring to those two, which one's doing better in the Zambezi regions? Okay.
Hold on.
Okay. If you see Kenyans doing better, ways of, is it manufactured here or you are importing it?
No, it's,
Can I just give you a mic?
so we, if someone who knows about carpentry, we did a Kenyan hive for us, because those ones attract bees more, because you don't need to trap it on a tree. Even if you put it on lower ground, a Kenyan hive can attract bees without you putting the trap on top. You can actually just put a Kenyan hive on the ground, put your, what do you call this? Your honeycomb, you cook your honeycomb, you put your honeycomb inside, they can still come from there. But if you're using the American one, you have to trap them from a higher distance.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, just in comment for that, we are busy promoting beekeeping, especially in the community forest.
Yes, sir.
And one of the challenges that we are facing that most of the material, they are imported, and we are importing them from outside. They build, but they are finding difficult to get the right materials. And now we are busy, like, to find the local manufacturer, especially for the beehive, because it uses wood. This I'm relating to my colleague there. And one of the products is to consider also that beekeeping, especially beehive, is on demand. And if we can use that local material to produce beehive, it could be a bit cheaper. Because currently, if you look at the price of the beekeeping, the hive is around 2,000.
Yes, it's very expensive.
Yeah, it's very expensive. The local farmer can't afford.
Yes, yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. We were also part of Namibia's Youth for Can. I had a couple of questions. The first one is for Mr. Michael, or the first one for Mr. Michael. The first one is there an initiative already in place for institutions of higher learning to incorporate forest inventory as part of the work integrated learning, especially for those students that are doing natural studies and spatial sciences, for the process of possibly breeding graduates that can add value to forest products and so on. And the second one is, you mentioned permitting systems. So how does one go about with the whole permitting system to become eligible to become a charcoal producer? And can I just finish my question?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry for disturbing. The second one goes to all the speakers. Are there any specific policies, directly or indirectly, that hinder in any way the production and retailing of your product? And if so, is there any way to get around that? And my final one goes to Mr. Leroy. Have you ever come firsthand across a result of lack of proper resource management, because you mentioned resource management? And if so, how did it look like, and how can we practically get around that?
So we had a big dealing with UNAM, where we provided them with samples and the way we produce it, and they had good results out of it, and that's where it stopped. I think it should be initiative as something that should be done, because it'll open it up and more understanding as well on the whole production practices. So I think this is something we need to take offline and see what can be done. The second question, if I remember, just help me again, was on?
Is this a question to Michael?
There was a second one on policies that was to all of us.
The other one?
Permitting system.
Oh, the permitting systems, yes. We've got and even if you go to the forestry office, they have a little pamphlet, and we have the same pamphlet on our side, giving you all the prerequisites. Where do you start? You must be either the legal owner, or you must have a contract, or you must have a letter of agreement. So there's lots of prerequisites. Then there's certain things that need to be in place. Thereafter, there's inspection on your farm. Once that inspection is done, it's always compulsory. You will then only be allowed to get the first harvesting permit for a period of 3 months. So there's strict rules. Also around that, you have to inform your neighbors. You don't need their consent. You have to inform them that you're doing it. So that there's certain rules around that. And obviously, you need to have your fire breaks. You need to have the area where you're going to go needs to be cleaned. So really, there's a long list. And that's why you haven't seen any fires last year on the charcoal farm. Okay, coming to the last one, and I'll pass on the policies. The policies are all there. And I think if I look at the charcoal industry, I think that's probably got the most policies and guidelines and things. But people don't always follow them. That is the sad thing. And it's not just in our industry sitting here, it's all over. Just take traveling on the road, it says 120. Who drives 120? It's a rule, it's law. People just don't follow it.
I mean, there are policies there. There are people who come in and monitor to check the health, because bees are classified under animals. So they need to be checked. Are they healthy? And also the place that you are doing your bee farming, is it suitable for bees to be staying in that area?
When it comes to cosmetic formulation in Namibia, it's unfortunate that we do not have standards in place yet. So the Namibian Standard Institution also has nothing in place that cosmetic formulators can follow here in Namibia. So I think it's actually what we need is the policies in place so that we can differentiate to make sure that the companies follow the necessary manufacturing standard processes.
I can say the same for the timber industry. When I started the company, the aim was not to go right in directly and start immediately manufacturing, because we knew that there was a lot of work that had to be done in creating an environment that is conducive and enabling for startups, for SME. So previously, there would be a lack of supply, lack of resource, even though there are a number of trees to be cut. But because it's not organized in a way that you can sustainably and timely get the timber, you can't make a promise to the market. You can't say, we're going to make beds or whatever product, because you end up not getting the resource. So we had to that's why I'm part of this event. There was a number of, as MC said, for 3 years now, and I think from the beginning I've been part of this discussions. There was a national conference, and I've always been echoing that we need to create tenure. You need to be a business in the timber industry needs to know that it can get timber for the next 5 years. If the Namibian timber was auctioned, so a lot of times it was the community forest timber, the group running the community forest, the forest management body, they would get an allowable cut, and then say they would choose 500 trees and say, okay, we wanna auction that once off. Now, if you come in as a startup, a business interested in adding value, you only have that 500. What do you offer that? So there wasn't a structure in the Act or regulations to promote continuous acquisition or continuous supply. So they actually decided to amend the Act to close the loopholes. In 2017, when harvesting was allowed, there were many loopholes with it that the Asian companies exploited. And that's why it became a national issue, in newspapers, and it was banned and so forth. So a lot of lessons learned that are now being incorporated in the new way of doing things. So That's why in Angola, in Angola, Zambia, there's a lot of things in the legislation that allows you to, for multi-year tenure, which is very important because if you start cutting down trees, you need to manage, and you can't just be allowed to manage for a year. You need something like 10 years. So it needs to be tied to how you go to the market.
You do with them. My second question goes to Mr. Andre. What's the population of bees currently in Zambezi or in Namibia, and how do you harvest the honey? How do you harvest the honey and yeah, those two questions. Thank you.
Areas where there's no grass or risk overgrazing. So if you leave those branches there and the rainy season comes and the small greens start again, they're protected. Animals can't graze it. After a period of 3-4 years, animals start trampling in it, so it goes back organic matter into the soil. So you must not remove all the litter, the branches and stuff here. You need to let it go back into the soil. So that's important. The others, that's when we say the other 50%, use that for your biochar, because that's your best biochar that you can produce. And the biochar is the thing of the future for Namibia. We need to create more awareness. Biochar needs to get back into the soil. Our soils are leached, especially when you look at agriculture through the chemicals. You can only restore it by putting biochar back into the soil.
Okay, the population of bees. You can't really tell the population of bees, but it's in thousands. You can't really like specifically say this is the number. You can't have a specific number of bees, but it depends on the number of hives you're having. But you can never tell the number of bees. Probably there are thousands, but you can never know the number of bees. You can never know the number of bees. It's impossible. Hives. Always needs hives. Alright. So now we're just having 15 hives that are active.
1-5.
50 and 1-5. 15 hives.
1-5.
Yes, 15 hives that are active. But you can't tell the number of bees that are in there. It's practically impossible. Because bees, you can even play with bees, you don't play with them. Those things, you don't play with those things. That's what she was asking harvesting.
Yes.
When you're harvesting, you have to wear protective gear. That one is the most important. Because the bees, they'll sting you to death. If you don't wear protective gear, they'll sting you to death. And you must also have a smoker. You use a smoker, you smoke them, then you take out the honey. You go and extract it. It depends whether you're having an extractor or using the dripping method. At first, we used to use the dripping method, but now we move to the extracting method. When you're using an extractor, it means you don't give the bees double work. Because when you're doing the dripping, it means you're removing the comb. So it means they have to at least build in the comb. But if you're just using the extractor, it just extracts the honey. They take back the honeycomb back into the hive.
The reason why you don't focus on replanting is because you do not believe that it's worth it, because it takes a lot of years for the trees to actually grow. So one of in Namibia, especially I would say Kundele region, there are projects that are actually trying to restore degraded areas, yet these individuals are not even responsible for creating this degradation in these areas. Yet your business relies on timber. You are directly benefiting from the environment, but you do not find it worth it to actually put in an effort to replenish what you are taking out.
Being the users of wood and timber for your production, what is your environmental responsibility?
I know we mentioned that yes, there are policies, but I think one thing which is a bit clear is the lack of policy certainty, and all of you are essentially commercial entities, so you do need policy certainty to be able to see how you can forecast your business, if there's profitability 10 years down the line, etc. And the reason I'm making that statement is because I think it's something I'm seeing in various industries. I'm from the asset management industry, maybe just for a bit of background on myself. One question, I have two questions. One of them is we are dealing with natural resources, and one theme which was coming out quite strongly is the concept of sustainability. So I want to know, there are some buzzwords that I'm sure we're all aware of regarding ESG and the like. So are there any standards and principles that are known globally to apply to these type of activities and industry? But I will say that with a bit of a personal grudge I have in terms of global standards being applied on developing countries. We are developing, we don't have certain industries in place. So maybe you can add like an African spice to it. But yeah, the question is, are there any such standards in place? The second thing I want to ask now is for me in my capacity as an asset manager. Are you guys, do you guys have scalability in your business? Will you come to market one day where you list on the NSX and all of us can partake in owning a share in these activities? So yeah, that's my question.
How to add value to Namibian products for local market, not for export, and how profitable is that? Thank you.
So the regeneration, you get plantations and then you get national forests. National forest, if you don't destroy, if you don't uproot, because we're not uprooting. So if you harvest, actually the areas where we've harvested, when you go there, you won't even see that we've been through those bush. Because we look at trees with a certain diameter, just 45 centimeters at breast height and wider. And one of our philosophies is to lower our carbon footprint. That's why we just don't want to focus on one country. We've located ourselves at the border to look at Angola and Namibia. So that when we get areas under management, it creates a wide, so that our footprint doesn't put any pressure. We don't have to harvest aggressively. So when it comes to regeneration, Kiat self-regenerates. We don't have to plant that. That is something that we still probably need to fund and do research on. But it's not a requirement for us to be sustainable. Yeah. As long as we get big enough areas, and if we do rotational harvesting, we can have sustainability and everybody benefiting. Our environmental responsibility, our vision is actually to reach net zero by 2050. So what that means is the fact that in our communal areas, people use firewood. That's actually what's caused Bambuland not to have trees. Because every day people make fire to cook. You know how many trees are cut down just for fires? So it's not the timber industry or commercial activities that have caused trees to disappear, desertification. It's actually domestic use. So what are we trying to do? Encourage people to get jobs and to look at activities where we encourage people to use alternatives. Gas. Once we stop making so many fires, you will see that the environment will start recovering. So that is one thing we believe in. To look at creating benefits for the community, water, putting water systems in boreholes, that is one of our targets. Once we provide boreholes, water security, communities can start making food and surplus and sell that for extra income, lowering the pressure on the environment. Things like that will go a long way in restoring environmental issues. The African spice, that is true. There is a lot of pressure, international regulations. The Paris Agreement, that is kind of like telling us to accelerate our efforts. Even though we've not gone through the initial hoops, we don't have the skills, we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the capacity, but we must do things that the first world countries are doing. So, but there is a collaboration between African countries to kind of not fall prey to that influence. We're actually standing together. I see between Angola and Namibia, there is collaboration to look at local value addition, to give chance, to give opportunity to local people, entrepreneurs, to give them that, to give them the space, to give them the resource, to give them the funding, so that we don't have to fall victim to what is happening in the international space in terms of regulation. The listing. Now, if you need to ask someone on the street or any person to invest, they want to know how much timber do you have? What's the resource base? So you need to have millions of hectares under management. Once we reach that stage, and we say for the next 20, 30 years we can harvest, even though the politics changes, even though the president changes, even though government officials are swapped out, then I think you can look at something like listing. Yeah.
When it comes to cosmetic manufacturing, there are certain world organizations that actually come in spec. For instance, if you do certain claims on your product, let me say if I claim that my products are organic, so there are organizations that actually come and confirm that whether the ingredients I use are really organic. So they start from where the ingredients are grown, how are they grown. If you use fertilizers, for instance, what type of fertilizers are you using? If they are harvested in the forest, they check where exactly it grows, and they check how it is harvested. Then in that way you get a certification if you comply. And this is a certification that you have to renew every year actually. And it's quite expensive. And the question on scalability, I think it's definitely a business that we can grow on a huge scale. Because at the moment, the ingredients that we use, which is mostly the marula and the kalari melon, only grows in certain parts of Africa. But then these are ingredients that are needed all over the world. So the raw materials are already being exported to other countries so that they do make products from it. So if we can have policies in place that then protect us to say that we are no longer just exporting the raw materials, but then we are able to manufacture the finished products in Namibia, then we export the finished products to other countries as well. In that way, we are able to scale the industry and also create more employment in the country.
Opening up the untapped opportunities. And I've seen that what they have said now is not all. People are here looking for the value, what values are added. Although we have few from 7th to 9th of September, I think it's a cross-bargain. If you come at this expo, then you will see a lot of value addition. So I just want to encourage you to stay tuned and just let us advise each other and consult each other. The other thing about the forest inventories, maybe that's a very good topic we need to incorporate as a module in the higher institutions. We have started to discuss this, and it's only a matter of time maybe to take it up at the higher institutions. And I thank you very much for all the panelists for the good work. There were questions directed to forestry, but I think they really answer all. So I thank you very much.